The color drains from his face first, like water pulled from a sink. It pools around his eyes, leaving them wide and milky with disbelief. His hands, usually so steady holding a whiskey glass, tremble. He opens his mouth, but no sound comes out. A gurgle, maybe, deep in his throat, like stones shifting in a riverbed. He clutches his chest, not dramatically, but in a sudden, sharp motion, as if trying to hold himself together, to literally prevent himself from scattering into dust right here, in the hushed, wood-paneled elegance of the private room. The heavy oak table between us feels like a battlefield. Papers are scattered, deeds, loan documents, a single, innocuous bank statement that started all this. His eyes lock onto mine, searching, accusing, pleading. But there's nothing left in my eyes for him. Just the cold, quiet satisfaction of gravity finally asserting itself. He makes a choked sound, a gasp, a half-formed word I can't make out, and then his legs give out. The expensive chair scrapes back sharply as he collapses, a heap of tailored wool and shattered secrets on the polished floor. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, it helps me more than you know. My life before felt like a perfectly staged photograph. Sunlit kitchen, 2 steaming mugs, hands clasped across the table. A shared glance that promised understanding, partnership forever. I curated it, invested in it. Not just emotionally, but literally. Our home was a testament to careful planning, shared ambition. My career, built block by block, a steel tower of logic and leverage, provided the solid ground beneath our feet. He had his work, his passions, golf, classic cars, charity galas that demanded dazzling smiles and effortless charm. I handled the finances, the investments, the architecture of our shared future. It felt right, balanced. He was the face, the charm, the connection maker. I was the engine, the strategist, the one who made the numbers sing. We complemented each other, or so I believed. My desire was simple, a life built on trust, prosperity, and the quiet, unwavering certainty of coming home to a partner who saw me, truly saw me, and valued the fortress we built together. I wanted peace, built on a foundation of absolute, unshakable loyalty. I wanted to believe in the photograph. The first crack in the lens was almost invisible. A small, unusual line item on a shared credit card statement. A payment to a landscaping company in a town 2 hours away, a town neither of us had any connection to. It was small, insignificant, easy to dismiss. Maybe a gift for a friend? A random expense he forgot to mention? But it pricked at me. My mind, trained to spot anomalies, to find the outlier that signals a problem in a vast sea of data, couldn't let it go. I asked him about it casually. His response was a little too quick, a little too smooth. Oh, that? Just helped a buddy out with something. Nothing really, he waved it away, changed the subject. The dismissal felt like a pebble hitting glass. It didn't shatter, but the perfect surface was marred, just slightly. The seed of suspicion, tiny and unwelcome, took root in the fertile ground of my carefully ordered world. I told myself I was being paranoid. My job required me to be suspicious, to look for fraud, for hidden liabilities. I was projecting surely. This was my personal life, not a balance sheet. But the feeling lingered. The landscaping payment led me down a rabbit hole, small click by small click. Public record searches, cross-referencing names and addresses, the cold, impersonal trail of digital breadcrumbs. The landscaping company led me to an address. The address led me to a name. The name wasn't a buddy. It was a woman. A woman whose social media presence painted a picture of a comfortable life, a charming house, a seemingly single existence. My heart began to beat with a frantic, irregular rhythm, a drum solo of dread in the quiet of my study. The picture wasn't blurry anymore. It was coming into sharp, terrifying focus. The more I dug, the uglier it got. That one payment wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom. There were other smaller payments initially, disguised as various things, consulting fees, property management, all routing back in convoluted ways to this woman. Then I found the larger ones. The transfers. Regular, substantial transfers to her account. My carefully constructed world didn't just have a crack, it had a gaping hole torn through its center. The money wasn't just for landscaping. It was rent. It was bills. It was supporting a parallel life I knew nothing about. The pit in my stomach wasn't dread anymore. It was a black hole, sucking the light and warmth out of everything I thought was real. I tried to talk to him, gently at first, hinting at financial irregularities I'd noticed, asking about his investments outside of our shared portfolio. He became defensive, then angry, accused me of not trusting him, of being obsessed with money. The gaslighting was subtle at first, a slow turn of the screw, making me question my own sanity, my own perceptions. Maybe I was seeing things? Maybe the stress of my job was finally getting to me? But the evidence was undeniable, etched in the cold, hard facts of bank statements and property records. I hired a private investigator. Not because I needed proof of the affair. The money was proof enough of some kind of relationship, a deep, ongoing commitment that bypassed me entirely. I hired him to get details, to understand the scope of the lie. And that's when I found it. Tucked away in a stack of documents the PI uncovered, public filings, but buried deep, linked indirectly through layers of corporate shells he'd painstakingly peeled back, was the mortgage on her house. The address linked to the landscaping company, the name linked to the suspicious transfers. And the mortgage payments, they matched the largest, most regular transfers from our joint account. He wasn't just supporting her. He was paying for her home, building her security, her future, with our money. With my money, earned through years of relentless work, of sacrificing my own desires for our supposed shared dream. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was financial. It was a calculated redirection of the very resources I had built, funneled into the life of the woman he was building that parallel future with. It felt like he was using the bricks of our home to build hers. The discovery of the mortgage payments changed everything. It wasn't just a fling. It was a partnership, a hidden marriage of convenience, financed by my unwitting contributions. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless, then incandescent with a cold, quiet rage. I stopped confronting him. The emotional pain was still a raw wound, a constant ache, but it was hardening into something else. Something sharp. Something dangerous. Trying to talk reason, trying to appeal to his conscience, that was useless. He had no conscience where this was concerned. He saw me as a problem to be managed, an obstacle to his comfort. He thought he was clever, covering his tracks. He thought his lies were impenetrable. This wasn't just about hurt anymore. It was about justice. Not the kind found in courtrooms, necessarily. A different kind. A more personal, precise kind. My early struggles had been about grappling with the pain and the lies. My rising challenges were about uncovering the truth. Now I reached a midpoint shift. The tears dried. The shaking stopped. I looked at the complex web of his deception, the financial trails, the hidden assets, and I saw not a source of pain, but a map. A map to his vulnerability. A map to hers. I would not be a victim. I would be the architect of the consequences. Everything fell apart after that. Not my outward life, not yet. I maintained the facade. The smiles at dinners, the questions about his day, the carefully constructed performance of a happy wife. Inside, though I was a ruin, the silence in the house, once comforting, became deafening, filled with the unspoken lies that hung in the air like poison gas. Eating dinner with him felt like sharing a meal with a stranger, a polite, charming stranger who was systematically robbing me blind and building a life with another woman using my resources. My friends noticed I was quieter, paler. I deflected their concern, saying work was stressful, which wasn't entirely untrue. The stress of holding the secret, of planning, of existing in this state of perpetual, simmering fury, was immense. I slept little, my mind racing, turning over possibilities, strategies. The deepening crisis wasn't a single event. It was the slow, suffocating realization that the person I had built my life with was a ghost, a projection, a betrayal in human form. Every shared memory felt tainted. Every touch felt false. All seemed lost, not just the marriage, but my belief in partnership, in trust, in the very foundation of my reality. I was adrift in a sea of lies, with no shore in sight. I had tried the direct route, the emotional route, the investigative route. None of it gave me back what he'd stolen. It only showed me the depth of the theft. The turning point came one sleepless night. Staring at the ceiling, the legal documents spread out on the floor beside the bed like a battlefield map. The mortgage documents. The name of the bank. A regional bank, not a national giant. A bank that, by the look of its recent financials I discreetly accessed, was struggling. Carrying significant debt. Looking for liquidity. My mind, the part of my mind that had built my career on identifying opportunities, on structuring deals, on acquiring assets, it clicked into place. He thought he was safe, hidden behind layers of transactions and shell companies, paying her mortgage to secure his comfort, her dependency, their future. But the mortgage itself was a vulnerability, a financial instrument, something that could be bought, sold, traded. Something I understood better than he ever could. The idea, when it arrived, felt less like a plan and more like an inevitable force of nature. I wouldn't just expose him. I wouldn't just divorce him and take my share. I would hit them where it hurt the most, using the very tool he thought was his secret weapon against me. Finance. I would take away her security, the home he was paying for, in a way that was sudden, absolute, and entirely within my power. I would buy the bank. Or rather, I would acquire the portfolio that held her mortgage. It was audacious. It was complicated. It would cost a fortune. But it was the perfect, icy, devastating answer. This wasn't just revenge. This was a strategic takeover. My determination solidified into something harder than steel. There was no going back. The hunt was on. The next phase of my life became a blur of meetings in sterile conference rooms, hushed phone calls, reviewing mountains of financial data. I engaged the best legal minds, the sharpest financial analysts. They didn't know the personal motive, of course. To them, I was a shrewd investor, identifying an undervalued asset, structuring a complex deal. I framed it as a strategic acquisition, a portfolio purchase that aligned with my long-term investment goals. Which, in a twisted way, it did. My goal was to reclaim what was mine, to dismantle the life he'd built on my foundation, and to do it with surgical precision. The target wasn't the whole bank, initially. It was a specific, somewhat obscure division that managed residential mortgages, particularly those originated during a certain period, in certain geographic areas. Her mortgage, I had confirmed, was in that portfolio. The negotiations were long, arduous, filled with jargon and numbers that meant nothing to the emotional core of my mission, but everything to its execution. There were frustrating delays, moments where the deal seemed on the verge of collapse. My stress wasn't about the financial risk. It was about the possibility of failing to deliver the justice I now craved with every fiber of my being. I pushed, I negotiated, I leveraged every connection, every resource I had. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My days were a tightrope walk between maintaining the facade of my normal life and orchestrating this elaborate, secret operation. The tension was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I felt like I was living two separate lives, one a hollow performance, the other a high-stakes game of financial warfare. The closer I got, the more exhilarating and terrifying it became. The paper trail I was creating was complex, designed to mask my involvement until the last possible second. Layers of holding companies, blind trusts, shell corporations. A mirror, in a way, of his own deceptive financial maneuvers, but on a vastly different scale and with a singular, focused purpose. Finally, the contracts were signed. The funding was secured. The acquisition was complete. I owned it. Not the whole bank, but the specific entity, the subsidiary, the portfolio that held her loan. The news made a ripple in the financial press, a quiet announcement about a strategic merger, an asset transfer. Nobody connected it to her, to him, to me. Not yet. The power I felt in that moment was intoxicating and terrifying. I held her future, his secret, in my hands. I could see her house, her street, her life, through the lens of the mortgage documents I now owned. It was no longer an abstract concept of betrayal. It was concrete, tangible, a debt I could call in. I waited. I didn't act immediately. I wanted the timing to be perfect. I wanted the reveal to be utterly devastating. I continued the charade at home, watching him, knowing his secret life was built on ground I now owned. The dry humor I'd always possessed twisted into something colder, more cynical. I'd catch his eye across the dinner table, a small, secret smile playing on my lips, and he'd smile back, oblivious. The irony was a bitter, exquisite poison I savored slowly. The plan wasn't just to cancel the loan. It was about the reveal. The moment the truth would hit him and her, with the full, crushing weight of my power. I orchestrated the meeting carefully. A private room in a neutral location. I invited him. Just him. I told him it was about finalizing some estate planning documents, something mundane and necessary we'd discussed months ago. He arrived looking slightly bored, slightly rushed, ready to sign whatever I put in front of him and move on with his day, presumably back to his other life. I had the documents laid out. Not estate plans. The acquisition papers. The loan documents. Her mortgage statement. His bank statements showing the transfers. The evidence, neatly arranged, undeniable. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. My voice was low, steady, stripped of all emotion save a quiet, lethal intent. "Robert," I said, using his full name, something I rarely did. His attention sharpened. "We need to talk about your investments." He shifted, a flicker of defensiveness in his eyes. "My investments are fine, Sarah. You handle most of it anyway." I shook my head slowly. "Not all of them. Some you've kept private." I pushed the stack of papers across the table towards him. The bank statements were on top, highlighting the large, recurring transfers. He picked them up, his brow furrowing in annoyance, ready with a practiced lie.
"Oh, that.
Just helping a business associate with some cash flow issues. Confidential." I let him finish. Let him hang himself with his own words. Then I slid the mortgage documents across. "A business associate whose mortgage you've been paying. On this property. For years." His eyes widened. The air in the room seemed to still. He looked at the property address, the loan number, the name of the borrower. Her name. He looked at the bank's logo on the document. Then he looked at me. His mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. The polished facade he'd worn for years, the mask of charming normalcy, began to crack, to crumble. I continued, my voice quiet, conversational, as if discussing the weather. "You thought you were so clever, didn't you? Hiding it all. Using our money, my money, to build her a life. A secure future, funded by my hard work." I watched him, clinical, detached. He started to hyperventilate, shallow, ragged breaths. "But you missed something, Robert. You forgot who you were stealing from. You forgot what I do." I leaned forward slightly, my gaze locked onto his. "You paid her mortgage to Bank of the Seaboard Holdings. A struggling regional portfolio holder. The kind of entity that's ripe for acquisition. The kind of entity I specialize in acquiring." The color drained from his face. He understood. He saw the trap closing. "Effective last month, Robert," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the tense silence. "Bank of the Seaboard Holdings is owned by a shell corporation. That shell corporation is owned by another. And that one is owned by me." I slid one final document across. A notice. A simple, official-looking letter. As the new owner of the loan portfolio containing her mortgage, I stated, the finality of the words hanging heavy in the air, "I have exercised the right to call the loan. Effective immediately. Principal and interest due in full. Or foreclosure proceedings will commence." The letter specified a date, just days away. There was no grace period. No negotiation. His eyes scanned the document, his hands trembling violently. He looked up at me. The denial, the shock, the absolute, gut-wrenching realization of his ruin hitting him in waves. He had used my strength, my resources, my trust against me. And I had used his own weapon, finance, hidden structures, strategic acquisitions, to dismantle everything he'd built outside our marriage. The weight of it, the finality, was too much. He clutched his chest, the gasp, the choked sound, and then he collapsed. A heap of ruined plans and exposed lies at my feet. The silence that followed his collapse was profound. The waiters, discreetly hovering outside, didn't stir. The world outside the heavy door continued oblivious. I didn't rush to him. I didn't offer comfort. I simply watched, a strange mix of cold satisfaction and weary emptiness settling over me. The immediate aftermath was a flurry of legal activity, though not the kind he or the mistress had anticipated. My lawyers handled everything. The foreclosure on her property proceeded swiftly, legally. She had no way to pay, no access to the hidden funds he'd been providing, funds I'd now effectively cut off or complicated beyond immediate access. Her protests, her pleas, were directed at a faceless corporation she didn't know I owned. Once he recovered from his collapse and the subsequent, necessary medical attention, faced the reality of his situation. Not just the loss of his mistress and her home, but the exposure, the financial fallout. The reputation he'd guarded so fiercely was in tatters. The resources he'd diverted were now traced, accounted for. My victory felt complex. It wasn't the cathartic explosion I might have imagined. It was quieter, colder. The years of betrayal, the pain, the sheer cost, emotional and financial, of his deception didn't vanish in that moment of his collapse. They lingered, like the ghost of a phantom limb. I had won the battle. I had dismantled his lie and her security with calculated precision. But the war had cost me my marriage, my perceived reality, a piece of my own heart that had been collateral damage. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel triumphant in a joyful sense. There was a deep, quiet satisfaction in knowing I had faced the betrayal head-on, refused to be a passive victim, and used my own unique strengths to reclaim my agency. I rebuilt my life, piece by piece. The house felt different now, cleansed of his lies, but also empty. I focused on my work, on my own financial empire, which was now considerably larger, built partly on the ruins of his secret life. The lesson wasn't just about trust, or betrayal, or even revenge. It was about power. The quiet, relentless power of knowing the numbers, understanding the system, and being willing to play the game, even when the stakes were your own heart. It was a bittersweet victory, a fortress built on the ashes of a life that was never truly real. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. And thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.